Well, good afternoon. Well, as you can see, this is a new backdrop behind me. Why do we have this behind me? Because the White House designed it, and we're going to keep it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and welcome to the 143 Landon Lecture on Public Affairs. The Landon Lectures were started in 1966 by the late Governor Alf Landon and the late K-State President James McCain. The goal of the Landon Lectures is to bring the most prominent public figures to Kansas State University to discuss the pressing issues of the day. We are very pleased today to welcome United States Senator Sam Brownback to the Landon podium to join 142 predecessors in bringing his thoughts and opinions on important public issues. Before introducing Senator Brownback, I would like to introduce other members of the platform party. On my left, Dr. Tom Harold, Professor of Animal Sciences and Industry, and President of our wonderful Kansas State Faculty Senate. Thank you. Next to him, Michael Burns, a senior in agricultural economics and our student body president, and an aspiring political leader. On my right, Edward Seaton, chairman of the Landon Patrons and editor-in-chief and publisher of the Manhattan Mercury. Next to him, Dr. Charles Reagan, associate to the president and chairman of the Landon Lecture Series. Hey, and let me ask you this. For 2005-2006, do you think we've had a sensational Landon Lecture Series? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are so thrilled and privileged to have our own U.S. Senator, Sam Brownback, with us today. Sam was an excellent student at Kansas State University and graduated with honors in agricultural economics. As many of you know, he became one of our most outstanding student body presidents ever. After leaving Kansas State, he went to the University of Kansas, where he received a law degree. No, I'm serious. In 1986, Senator Brownback was chosen as the youngest Secretary of Agriculture in state history. During the period when Sam was Secretary of Agriculture, he took a leave of absence for a year because he was selected for the very important and nationally prestigious position of what we call the White House Fellow. And believe me, that is an outstanding award. Well, he served in the office of the U.S. Trade Representative during the administration of President George H.W. Bush. In 1994, as you will recall, he was elected to the U.S. Congress representing the 2nd District of Kansas. 2 years later, the people of Kansas elected Sam Brownback as U.S. Senator, serving out the unexpired term of Senator Bob Dole, who ran for president on the Republican ticket in 1996. In 1998, he was elected to a full 6-year term, and he was reelected to a 2nd term in November of 2004. Senator Brownback currently serves on a number of Senate committees, including the powerful Senate Appropriations Committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, the Joint Economic Committee, and he is also chairman of the Helsinki Commission, just to name several. Senator Brownback has been a valuable member on all of his Senate committees. but he has played an extremely important role in the last 2 or 3 years on the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Brownback has distinguished himself as an outstanding public servant and a senator who deeply cares about the poor, the malnourished, and the mistreated around the world. Recently, he has received national attention and acclaim for trying to get the nation, and really the world, to help thousands and thousands of victims in the Darfur region of Africa. He has traveled there several times and has urged a significant increase in aid to the people in the Darfur region and in many other countries in Africa. He has been a strong advocate for democracy and human rights all over the world. And he has been at the forefront of people in the House and the Senate speaking against the violent and sexual conduct of movies and television programs. Well, I know that Senator Brownback is giving serious consideration to running for President of the United States. Some political pundits might be overlooking Senator Brownback right now. But by January and February of 2008, you can rest assured that Senator Brownback will be a major political force, if he so decides, in the Iowa caucuses and in the New Hampshire and South Carolina primaries. He and his wife Mary have 5 children: Abby, Andy, Elizabeth, Mark, and Jenna. Their home is in Topeka, Kansas. I'm very proud to tell you that Abby Brownback, who's sitting right there, is a junior at Kansas State right now. She is doing a great job as a student and as a person who works for our great newspaper, the Collegian. Well, let's give Abby a big hand. Abby, thanks so much for coming to Kansas State. Well, Senator Brownback is the 3rd Kansas State graduate to give a Landon lecture, and we are certainly pleased that one of our own students and student body presidents is returning to speak on the Landon lectures. Please help me welcome a very good friend of mine for many, many years, U.S. Senator Sam Brownback.
Thank you, John, and thank you all. Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you, and I like the backdrop, purple in the White House. That really looks and mixes well, I think. It's a pleasure to be able to join you and see so many family and friends that are here. I would, if you wouldn't mind joining me and recognizing my wife's here with me, Mary, and without her, I'm nowhere, and she's a wonderful lady, and delighted to. We happened to meet at that other university, but I'm sure we would have met here, hon, if you would have gone to school here. Although she contends that the time that when I was at K-State, and here I should have listened to my mother, and any of you that are out there that your mother nags on you about something and you don't do it, particularly style-wise, listen to your mother. Because when I was at K-State, I had about a 4-inch afro, and my mom didn't like it particularly. And now that those pictures are starting to circulate back around of that 4-inch afro, and now I don't like it. So, if I'd just been better off, and my mom happens to be here, Bob and Nancy Brownback are here today, if you wouldn't mind greeting them as well. And my one final introduction from family, just my in-laws, John and Ruth Stauffer, my mother and father-in-law are here. Glad to have them here as well. This is a singular honor. When I was student body president, majoring in agriculture economics, I sat up on this stage and listened to great lectures being given. And then to be asked to give one, I'm honored to be asked, but we'll see if I can perform nearly to the category that the others did. By the way, agriculture economics, right pick, good major for going into politics. It'll serve you well. There are many of us in the world. The former governor of Michigan, John Engler, was an agriculture economics major. The last premier of the Soviet Union was an agriculture economics major. He was the last, so I don't know if that's a good post to be on. Mikhail Gorbachev. It's a good major. It's a good place to be. So much reminiscing for me coming into town and driving over the hill, and I think back to 1974, coming into town in my F-100 blue pickup truck with a 3 on the tree. Most of you as students will not even recognize that term, but the older will recognize what a 3 on the tree is. That I came into town with a 4-inch afro to the point that I didn't need a pillow at night because I could just bounce on my hair. With a love for country western dancing. I love swing dancing. I was in the AGR fraternity, the Alpha Gamma Rho fraternity. No AGRs here. Well, a couple. It was kind of a rowdy house then. It probably is a rowdy house now. I don't know. I always had difficulty going with them. I loved the country western dance, but you know, a guy with a 4-inch afro in a country western bar is just kind of out of place. And so I had difficulty being accepted, but I found I could shape my fro to look more like a cowboy hat, and I was all right when I would do that. And there's a lot of changes that have taken place at K-State since I was here, and they're wonderful changes, and the growth of the university and the pride of the school that's taken place, and all those things have been so positive, and John Weefald has been such a key leader. But the biggest thing, and this is no surprise, the biggest standout thing is football. Of change from when I came here in 1974 versus now, because just a great football school. Bill Snyder, Coach Prince, I give the best to them. But when I was here, as a number of you will remember, we tore down the goalpost if we won a game. And that was if it was against Manhattan High School. Joe Knopp, I thought I saw. Right, Joe? That's true, isn't it? Matter of fact, and this is true, too. Wichita State University dropped its football program while I was here at school. And the next power ratings came out the next week, and K-State was rated under Wichita State in power ratings in football after they had dropped their program. And, then they had a crime committed in Aggieville that they reported during that period of time. Bill Felber was, I think you were even with the newspaper then, Bill. With the Mercury, and they reported that somebody broke into a car in Aggieville, and there was on the dashboard was 2 tickets to a K-State football game. And when they come to the crime scene and they were investigating the crime, they found 4 tickets to the K-State football game. And then my all-time classic favorite that I loved was the bumper sticker developed during that season that had I-70, K-State nothing. And I thought, that's pretty clever. You got to give it to him. That was clever, but no more. Purple's back, and Purple's back in basketball too. I was at the KU State game where we won after 13 years, and cheering happily. That was. I've told the president my solution to how we win here in Manhattan now, since we haven't won in Bramlage Fieldhouse since Bramlage has been built. I shared this at lunch, but I'm going to share the secret here as well. I think we need to move the game back to Ahern Fieldhouse and invite Norm Stewart over from MU to come and just to recognize him and to jinx the Jayhawks. I think the mixture of those two together will help us. What I want to talk about, and this is of sorts the remake of a 1950s movie, and I want to see how you like it. I want to talk about American exceptionalism, that this is a special place. And this is a 1950s movie, and that this was the Ronald Reagan speech of the 1950s when he would travel around the country for General Electric as he's getting known across America, not as a movie actor in some B-grade films, but as he's getting known to America as an idea for this country. And he talked about American exceptionalism, that this is a special place, that this is a unique place, that this is a special country between 2 oceans made of people all over the world, and it has a special mission and a special calling. And it was American exceptionalism, as designed by the pundits at the time, and you can recognize that terminology from history. De Tocqueville saw America as an exceptional place, and you can see that in Lincoln's comments about America being an exceptional place. And I want to talk about American exceptionalism today. Reagan would put it in optimistic and confident terms of his vision for America as being an inspiring and ennobling bright city shining on a hill, an ideal to be aspired to by each and every citizen, a beacon of hope to the oppressed and the downtrodden around the world. I had the opportunity to meet Ronald Reagan only once. I was a lowly White House fellow in the Bush 1 White House in 1991. Reagan had retired, moved back to California, and we as a White House Fellows class had begged to see the past president, the former president, and we got an opportunity to see him. He had a great sense of wit. He told a wonderful little story. Somebody asked him in the group, what one thing didn't you get done as president that you wish you had? And Reagan, you could tell, had this question before. He had the whimsical look in his eyes, and he kind of looked up and he said, I wished I'd have brought back the cavalry. And to think of Reagan, you could say, well, yeah, I'll bet he wished he had brought back the cavalry. But he had such a genial nature and humility. It was impressive to me as one so powerful. He had a saying on his desk in California that I thought was so good and so appropriate, and the saying said this: you can be too big to be used by God, but never too small. And it struck me as a profound statement about how to make a difference, and that Reagan seemed to embody this statement as well. I attended his funeral this past year. Like millions of other Americans, I had the chance then to reflect with gratitude on his example, his courage, and his leadership. Someone told me that Mother Teresa, upon meeting Ronald Reagan, had this to say about him. She said that in him, simplicity and greatness lie. In the past year, I've also attended the funerals of Rosa Parks, who sat down on the bus, and by that gave us a generation that stood up. I've attended most recently the funeral of Coretta Scott King. We've lost some giants lately. People who embodied the very essence of leadership and who led this nation in realizing the principles upon which the country was founded. Their examples and their lives inspire us to carry their torch forward, inspired by what we can be as a nation when we live up to our best traditions. At Reagan's funeral, the image of Margaret Thatcher is the one that remains in my mind and stands out the most. She was shrouded in a black veil, hobbled by health problems, and nonetheless stood brave and undaunted, resolved to pay tribute to her ideological partner, who with her had changed the world. It reminded me that each of us are here for a reason and a brief season, that as autumn leaves, we all fade and pass. And when we pass from this world, it will be our privilege to be able to say, I did my calling. I fought the good fight. I did my duty. Certainly Reagan did, as did Rosa Parks and Coretta Scott King. But ideas and ideals live on, picked up by the next generation, the next Reagan, the next Parks, the next King. And while some battles have already been won, others remain to be fought. When Reagan traveled the country for General Electric, as I noted in the 50s, he would often speak about this characteristic of uniqueness to America, American exceptionalism. As I noted, this great nation, made up of people from all over the world, had a special place and a special destiny for mankind. Tony Blair picked up the mantle of talking about America and being a special place most recently. And a few years ago, he gave a speech to a joint session of Congress. He went ad lib for a point in time in his speech, and he noted this. He said, I'm sure right now someone in New Mexico or Idaho, someplace in this country I haven't been but I want to go, is saying right now, why us and why now? Why is so much called of America? Why is so much required of America? And Tony Blair said, my simple response to them is, it is your time and it is your destiny. Indeed it is. But what is the basis for this American calling? this American exceptionalism? I believe it is in our fundamental goodness, and that if we lose our goodness, we will most surely lose our greatness. Certainly we have our problems and often get things wrong, at least for a while. But then some movement based on goodness and fixing what's wrong will start up and not stop until the problem's eliminated. Like the abolitionist movement that settled Kansas with a heart to end slavery, or the Greatest Generation that wouldn't stop until fascism was dead, or the civil rights movement that sought to end segregation. Each of these movements made much progress in achieving a society committed to both righteousness and justice, those two hallmarks of a healthy society. Good always triumphs over evil, even though it can take a while. Light always overcomes darkness, even though it can seem awfully dark. So what are the battles today that we must wage in order that the United States is to remain an exceptional nation, a beacon of light and hope to others? I believe that the core battle of our day is the battle to defend the inherent dignity of each and every person, the inherent beauty of each and every soul to be respected and treated as beautiful, unique, a sacred child of a loving God, no matter where they are, no matter what they look like, no matter what their status. Each is noble and should be treated as such. The beauty of the individual is truth, and we know it in our hearts. Ronald Reagan firmly believed that American exceptionalism was built on a culture, an American culture, that celebrated each life, that reveres each individual. And while we have made great progress in establishing a culture that respects the dignity of every person, we have more to do before we rest. Indeed, I believe our generation will be judged by our efforts and by our accomplishments in fighting for the dignity of every individual, and we will fight for all by fighting for each. We must reach out to the poor and dispossessed, offering them hope, but not fostering dependency. We must never treat one group of persons as somehow of less worth than another. When we have done that in the history of mankind, we have always regretted it. As Bono recently said, and believe me, I'm not used to quoting rock stars, where you live should not determine whether you live. Ultimately, this is a discussion about our culture and our character. Our culture must be compassionate, and our character must be based on the pursuit of what is right and what is just. These are time-honored truths of American exceptionalism, but they are also universal battles. How about some examples? Let's start with poverty in America. We have too many in the United States who are in poverty. We saw their faces in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and I've seen their faces across this nation and in Washington, D.C. We recognize that they are bound by chains that they cannot break alone. We must help them, but in such a way as not to build dependency, but rather self-sufficiency. According to everything we know from the statistics, the best ways to self-sufficiency and out of poverty are work and marriage. Ron Haskins of the Brookings Institute recently testified in front of a U.S. Senate hearing regarding poverty. He said this, quote, "There are only two ways known to man and God to reduce poverty. Number one is work, and number two is marriage. If the single most potent antidote to poverty is work, marriage is not far behind." Haskins went on to say that if we could just achieve the marriage rate of the 1980s, we could reduce child poverty by almost 30%. But the institution of marriage is hurting in America. Marriage rate has plummeted 48% since 1970. Nearly half of all new marriages now end up breaking up. One result of this weakening of marriage has been the intractable poverty related to single-parent families and out-of-wedlock births. 40 years ago, New York Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, a friend of mine, has passed away, famously warned about the crisis of the black family. The percentage of out-of-wedlock births among African Americans at that time was 25%. It is now almost 70%. This crisis of marriage is directly related to the crisis of poverty. Children of single mothers are 5 times more likely than other children to be poor, and nearly 80% of all children suffering long-term poverty come from broken or never married families. Let me be clear here as well. You can raise good children in single-parent households, and many of you perhaps here today come from that type of environment. It is possible, and many do it in heroic situations. But it's much more difficult, and the numbers move against us in a broad society. The crisis of poverty in this country is in large degree a crisis of marriage. Marriage has the effect of lifting children and their parents out of poverty. After the birth of a child out of wedlock, only 17% of poor mothers and children remain poor if the mother marries the child's father. We must shore up this institution of marriage through programs like marriage initiatives in the nation's capital, where couples are given community assistance, education, financial incentives they need to get married and to stay married. In the battle against poverty, we cannot ignore the central role of family structure. Stage 1 of welfare reform, I would contend, was an excellent accomplishment on eliminating disincentives to work, and half of the welfare rolls have been reduced. Stage 2 of welfare reform must be to eliminate those disincentives to marriage and still embedded in our benefit systems at the state and federal level. It is wrong to penalize women and children for mothers' decision to get married. This is a choice we should encourage and not discourage. How about another example? Prison recidivism. In 1980, we had about 500,000 prisoners in the United States. Now the number stands at 2.1 million. And today it is more likely that those once imprisoned in an American prison system will go back. We have a 2/3 recidivism rate. In other words, once you go into prison, 2/3 of the people that come out will go back into the system. And perhaps even more frightening, children of those who have been incarcerated are 5 times more likely to go to prison than children of parents who have never been incarcerated. The sins of the father visiting the child. However, there is hope in the midst of these dire statistics, and this hope can be found in programs that not only nurture education and job training skills, but nurture the soul of the individual as well. Today in prisons where mentoring programs and faith-based initiatives are operating, the recidivism rate, the rate of return of prisoners, is below 10%, from 2/3 to 10%. Why? Because while the body may be locked up, the soul of the inmate is free, and that freedom of soul can lead to a reformation of life that is rooted in the assurance that there is life beyond poverty, drug addiction, or crime, and that anyone can contribute in this society in a positive manner. But perhaps more profoundly, that each and every life is precious and worthy of the ideals that founded this nation. These programs respect human dignity and effectively reduce crime at the same time. Instead of treating the prisoner as disposable, they are treated as people with dignity, who nonetheless must pay for their crime. The difference is that they are changed for the better on the inside, and we're better off when they're on the outside. What about Africa? President Weefald noted that. This is the continent with the most concentration of suffering anywhere in the world. 60% of the children, 60% of the children in sub-Saharan Africa have malaria. Over 1 million will die of this preventable disease this year. 75% of them children under the age of 5 this year. A genocide continues in Darfur. Each day, an estimated 1,000 preventable deaths happens in the Congo. A silent tsunami every 4 months. I've seen their faces in refugee camps and squalor. I've met women over 60 and girls of the age of 4 that were victims of multiple rapes associated with war. 60 to 4. I've met child soldiers abducted and forced to kill at age 11. I've met women who have lost their husbands and children to the ravages of AIDS, and they themselves have it too. Yet hope remains, and our hearts go out to them. We must help, but again, not in a way that builds dependency, but rather in a way that builds dignity. Many have stated to me, and they know it in this country, we have given millions, if not billions for years, in aid to Africa, And people are worse off today than they were when we started. What went wrong? Certainly some of the money went into dictators' pockets, but also much of it was wasted on conferences and consultants telling people what to do rather than giving them the tools to do it with. Let me give you an example. Malaria. We spend over 90% of our money budgeted for malaria on consultants. Now, the African leaders I talk to tell me that they know what to do about malaria. They don't have the money to do it with. Indeed, it's the old adage, you can teach a man to fish, but if he has no fishing pole, he isn't going to catch many. We must change this by getting medicines and food and water drilling equipment, and African-trained doctors and teachers to Africa, not one more conference at a nice hotel. Also, you need to go to Africa, people-to-people style. You need to do a work-study abroad in Africa, in Rwanda, in Malawi, in a country there, or take a spring break trip. Instead of going south, go really south. Go and visit. Go with a group that drills water wells. Go with a group that goes and helps distribute malaria medicines. You will be changed forever. You need to do it. American exceptionalism also leads to the pursuit of big dreams. Dreams so big, others wouldn't even think of them. Like the end to death by cancer by the year 2015. 92 senators recently sent a letter to President Bush urging this objective, and we can do it. With more and earlier diagnostic tools, more treatments approved earlier on an experimental basis, and healthier lifestyles. People will still get cancer, but we can stop deaths by cancer if we truly focus on this worthy effort. And can you imagine the freedom that that brings? To be able to say that and to do it. The fear of getting cancer is the number one fear in the United States today. Number two, by the way, is public speaking, if any of you were interested in that. What liberty it would be, what a gift to the world of American exceptionalism. Another exceptional-sized dream is cutting our dependence on foreign oil and starting the move towards other energy sources. Again, America is called upon to lead, and we're seeing the President talk about that this week. Let me give you a quick example of something we can do right now. Half of the people in America drive less than 20 miles a day. Now, not very many of them live in Kansas, but half of America only drives 20 miles or less a day. What if they had a plug-in car that when they pulled into the garage at night, they plugged it in? And it can do its first 20 to 30 miles on electricity and then switch over to run completely on ethanol. That technology is available today, and a bipartisan bill in the Congress is moving forward to move and to help move that technology to market now. It will drop our dependency on foreign oil, and it will help America lead in an area that needs leadership, of us moving the economy away from the gasoline, hydrocarbon base that we're on right now. All of this can, and I believe must be done while balancing the budget and continuing to grow the economy. The uncontrolled spending going on in Washington has to be brought into check. Our problem in Washington is that we have a systems failure, and the system currently is designed to spend. Again, as Ronald Reagan once noted, there's nothing so permanent as a temporary government program. What I've been arguing for in the Senate is a systems change. 25 senators supporting legislation to create a government reform commission modeled after the base closing realignment commission, where we've been able to close military bases and put those assets into higher priority areas. The system works where a commission meets, they look at all of the military bases, they say these should be eliminated, they give the list to the president, he or she checks off on it, it goes to Congress, it's to be voted on up or down within a certain period of time, unamendable. Either you agree or you disagree. And by that system, we've been able to close 100 military bases, put that money in higher priority area. We need to use that system and that approach for the rest of government. For the rest of government. A systems approach to be able to cut and reduce ineffective or wasteful government spending. I've been around the government system, and believe me, it's built to spend. It's you got to change the system. Otherwise, it's like asking a cultivator to do what a combine does. It just doesn't fit. It won't get it done. You've got to change the system. And I also believe we need an alternative flat tax to keep the economy growing and creating jobs. Not a removal of the current tax code, which I would support, but we've tried that for a long period of time. I think it's time for us to build into the tax code an alternative flat tax. If you want to file into the old tax code system, God bless you, here it is, go ahead. We're going to create an alternative flat tax, 19%, no deductions, no credits, no nothing. Here's the rate, period. You want to do it, this is it. You pick which way you want to go. You can't jump back and forth, but you pick which way to go as a way of growing the economy. My fellow Wildcats, don't look for change, for you are the change. You are the revolution. And each of you has the quality of exceptionalism I speak of today. Each of you holds the key to the ideals of fundamental goodness, a greatness based on purity of purpose. But the question remains, who among you will have the bravery needed to turn the key, unlock its possibilities, and lead all those searching for the opportunity that we call America? May America remain exceptional on through my generation and yours, as we remain true to our calling and those who have passed before us. God bless you all. God bless America. Thank you.
Thank you. That was perfect.
Thanks, John. Thank you.
Really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to come to Grand Valley. It was perfect. No, everyone loved it.
Thanks. Thank you.
And you'll take a few questions.
Oh, yeah. Right. Sure. Thank you.
Senator, thank you so much for a wonderful and uplifting and so positive Landon lecture. Let's give him another big hand. Was that great or what? Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Senator Brownback would be very happy and honored to answer some of your questions. And as you know, we have mics set up. So to your right or to your left, whichever is closer. So you have an opportunity to ask questions. So is that Dave Mugler over there?
It sure is.
Well, okay, you got to take this one. Okay,
take this one.
There he is, Dave Mugler.
I noted at lunch today that Dave is the reason I'm at K-State. I was enrolled to go to the University of Kansas undergrad. I was elected state president of the Future Farmers of America, and Dave said, "You can't go to KU. I mean, you can't do that." And he's an imposing figure. I think he's 6'4". I'm, well, okay. And so I was a Wildcat, and very happily. Dave, good to see you. And Lois, I think, is here too. Thanks for coming.
Senator Brownback, welcome back to Kansas State University.
Thanks.
It was because of students like you in class some 30 years ago that I felt that I had the best job on this entire campus at Kansas State University. We are most grateful for your exceptional leadership as our student body president, as our Secretary of Agriculture in Kansas, as our U.S. Senator. My question is, how might we better support you and your family as you provide this leadership today and in the future?
Thanks for asking, and thanks for asking it that way. You know, and if I could put it this way to start with, number one is to pray for us. I mean, we need wisdom. We need wisdom in this country to fulfill such an incredible calling at such an incredible time. This nation of 5% of the world's population controls 30% of the world's economy, a third of the world's military spending. No military is anywhere close to this. 40% of the world's R&D budget, research and development. I think as my kids would say, this place rocks. I mean, and really, no nation has been more powerful in the history of mankind than where America sits today. But too much is given, much is required, and we really need wisdom in that, because there's lots of choices you can make. And then I hope people act. I really mean it when I encourage you to go to Africa. I think doing an impact trip, instead of going for a fun trip somewhere, go to, as I mentioned, Kigali, Rwanda. It's cheaper. There's not near the crowd of tourists around. But to go to the Genocide Museum there and see baby skulls and femur bones, and you just go, this can't happen. And to recognize that if the U.S. puts a force of 5,000 troops in there 12 years ago, or the international community just stays there, these people don't die. I mean, it's an awesome thing, and it would be a very good thing for people to do. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Senator. I have two questions to you. I appreciate your lecture on American exceptionalism, and maybe you can help with my thesis by answering my first question. How would you define the concept of American national identity, and what does it mean to be American for you? And my second question is, the president of Amnesty International here on campus, I'm interested in the situation in Darfur. And last week you introduced the resolution in the Senate to urging president to act on the situation in Darfur. But there is also the act, Darfur Peace and Accountability Act that you sponsored last year that is still is processing in Congress, and it got stuck in House of Representatives. And what can Americans, and especially Kansans, do to encourage House of Representatives to get acted on this bill?
Thanks for the questions. Number one, for me, what does it mean to be an American? To me, it means to be given a great set of talents and opportunities that I'm responsible for, and that I need to help others with. I mean, this is an incredible gift to be here in this country, but it makes it also an incredible requirement to be able to use that wisely and for the benefit of others. On the Darfur Peace and Accountability Act, we've gotten it through the Senate. This is to put a series of sanctions on those most involved in this genocide. The government in Khartoum and the leadership there, this is their second genocide. They did it against the southern people in Sudan, and now they're doing it against the people in the west. And they need to be held accountable by us and by the international community. It's getting held up in the House. Some people want to put a capitals market sanction on it and top of it, that any investment that comes into our capital markets is pulled into. I can't get that through the Senate, and yet they want that added tool, and so we're, my estimation, letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. They're wanting something on that bill that I don't think we can't get through the Senate. I think we'll get it through, though, now. The President has spoken earlier this week about doubling the troop levels there, getting NATO involved, and I think that's going to start moving us in the right direction. We've got to establish peace there in this region, and we can. We can do it.
Thank you.
Please.
Hello, Senator. You spoke to us about cancer treatment, and I was just wondering if you could also talk to us about not only embryonic but umbilical cord stem cell research and your feelings on that.
Yes. The issue of stem cell research is obviously a very hot political issue. I support stem cell research. We support it heavily, strongly. We are getting things done. There's three types, at least three types, but three general categories. There's stem cells that come from the destruction of a human embryo. There's stem cells that come from cord blood as a child is born, in both the cord blood and in the placenta. And then there are adult stem cells that you have in your body. Stem cells, if you think of them in general, these are they're a maintenance crew in the body. They're janitors in the body, and so they all go around, and you need something fixed or a light bulb fixed or changed, they kind of move around and do it. But if a truck drove through this building and you sent the janitor to fix it, he'd go, "That's a little big for me. I don't think I can get it done." So what we're learning in our technology in doing this is you take a bunch of these janitor cells out, you grow them outside of the body, then you put them in the damaged area, and they can fix it. So you're seeing hearts repaired with adult stem cells. You're seeing children no longer have leukemia or sickle cell anemia by a match with a cord blood stem cell. The problem area comes in the embryonic stem cell area, because there you have to destroy the embryo to get the stem cells. We are researching in that area. We are funding research in that area, but not on new lines developed after 2001. And the basis is the biggest basis, our biggest political debate we have in society today, which is, when does life begin? And when does it become sacred? And some would say right after the union of the egg and the sperm, and others would say it's later in the system. And so that's why the fight about the embryonic. The beauty of the science is we are getting cures using adult and cord blood. I have had people in to testify in committees. A man with Parkinson's disease took his own adult stem cells, grew them outside the body, put them in on the left-hand side of his brain, and Parkinson's free for a period of 5 years. We had trouble getting him in to testify because he was going on African safaris. We couldn't get him to come in. We're seeing people walk through the use of cord blood that had spinal cord injuries. But we have difficulty because of this biggest of political debates, and I believe that sacredness of life begins at the very beginning. A number of people do, some don't, and that's the one we're hung up on. We can and we are pushing forward in all of these areas, and I think you're going to see some marvelous cures coming forward. I think you're seeing them right now.
Please.
Hello, Senator Brownback. Welcome back to Kansas State.
Thank you.
I appreciate your efforts in trying to find solutions for the oppressed in Africa. This is great. However, you mentioned the poor African Americans in the country and their struggle. Well, sir, I am from a single mother home, and I was pretty blessed, and I was pretty lucky to have a mother who was a teacher, and she could afford. She didn't have to be dependent per se. But my question is, you mentioned marriage. The idea of forcing someone to marry is kind of strange, because you have a hostile environment when a woman's trying to get away from that situation, because I do believe that women mostly, had the right to be independent, especially if they do not want to be with the father of their child for any kind of situation. So my question is, sir, how would you regulate this? Because despite poverty, African Americans are not dependent. We are sufficient.
Thank you. Number one, I wouldn't force anybody to get married. And as I noted in the speech, a number of people are very successful raising children in single environments. But it's a heroic effort. And you look at the numbers collectively, and it's just much more difficult for people to be able to do that. And that's supported by all the social data. So what we are attempting to do, and I tried to describe this very briefly in a policy design, is two things. And we held a hearing on this. One was the creation of marriage development accounts. And this is where the government puts up $1. It's matched by $2 in the private sector. If the individual couple seeking to get married will put $1 in, there'll be a 3-to-1 match on starting a marriage development account. They have to be below 200% of poverty to qualify for this. We're trying it in the nation's capital to see if it works. It has bipartisan support. Left, right, everybody's supporting this. Nobody has to accept and do this. They can say, look, I don't want it. Great, fine. You decide. But here it is, and we're doing this because we so believe in this institution and its importance. There are difficult family situations. I'm not unaware of that. There clearly are. But we also clearly don't have sufficient family formation. Plus, we held a hearing on this. We had a couple come in who had lived together for 20 years, 4 children between the two of them, decided to apply for the marriage development accounts, qualified, everything. And they said that every one of their friends came up to them and said, "Are you crazy for getting married? Are you crazy? You're going to give up this particular assistance that you have and that. There were 3 programs that they were going to give up to get this marriage development account. And the couple said, well, we just think it's the right thing to do. And I'm sitting there listening saying, do we have that sort of disincentive built into the system? And so we followed that up, and that's what people were saying, well, yes, you've got these sorts of things built into the system. We don't and should not force anybody, but nor should we be on the other side of it saying that you've got to give everything up to get married in the system. And that's what we're trying to work on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome home, Senator, by the way.
Thank you.
My name is Michael Lee, and I'm a senior in biology and sociology, but more importantly, I'm also a Korean American. And I'd like to comment that I was not only enthralled, but surprised to see you in the documentary concerning the Underground Railroad from North Korea to South
Soul
Korea.
Train.
Soul Train, right. And what's much more surprising was that it wasn't a senator from California or New York, which has a much greater population of Koreans, but a senator from Kansas, which has a smaller, much smaller, but yet growing population of Koreans. But my question is, with the current situation in North Korea, what issues are happening that are improving the poverty and, more importantly, the devastation that's going on over there?
Well, thank you for recognizing that. And maybe it's just my history, but the longer I've been around Kansas, the more pleased I am to be a Kansas in our history. And you may have recalled in this state's history, the Underground Railroad operated quite effectively, freeing slaves. And I grew up in the eastern part of the state where that railroad would operate. And so when I started meeting with Korean Americans who were working on this, I was just going, God bless you, count me in. What can we do? And it's beautiful. I've been to the North Korean-Chinese border where they're operating, and these people are sacrificing. These are folks successful from South Korea, Korean Americans. They go over there, establish a little business or something that's kind of a front to it, or a school or something, and then they're just helping North Koreans escape, is what they're doing, risking virtually everything that they have. But the Korean-Chinese border is unguarded. You can it's very simple to get across. But they need help once they get there. And that's why we've pushed the North Korean Human Rights Act, and why I'm pushing that. And I think the thing we can do now is focus not just on the nuclear ambitions of North Korea, which we believe they already have nuclear weapons, but delegitimize the Kim Jong-il regime by pointing out its horrific human rights record, which is what delegitimized the Soviet Union. When people finally saw how they treat their own people. North Korea has a gulag system of 250,000 people in it. It has lost 1/10 of its population over the last decade. It is an authoritarian, repressive, Stalinistic regime that has no regard for the individual. And we've got to trumpet that. And I think as we talk and we move that you will see the legitimacy of that regime fall, and it can't happen too soon. That is a horrific place of what's happening there. And I think it's a role of all Americans to call upon that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Senator. My name is Elise DeWitt, and I'm a recent military retiree with 25 years in the Army Medical Department. I'm also the mother of a K-State senior. Thank you. It was an incredible privilege and pleasure to take care of soldiers. They are just wonderful people.
Hear, hear.
Yeah. I'm also the proud mother of K-State senior, who, by the way, is planning to go to Africa this summer.
Thank you.
So, my question has to do with military medicine. I'd like to hear your opinions about the most recent DOD proposal to as much as increase the cost share for military retirees under 65 as much as 300%. I find this personally very difficult to accept, because since coming to Kansas to retire, I'm a native California, but I've adopted Kansas as my state, that I have repeated difficulty accessing timely health care at Fort Riley to meet TRICARE standards. So what about their plans to monumentally increase the cost share for retirees while they have great difficulty providing care?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for serving the length of time and what you've done in the military. And I find today's military, and I've been around it a lot, an absolutely superb organization, well-led, an excellent group, dedicated soldiers, doing an outstanding battle in the war against terrorism. And you can get a lot of negative feedback from Iraq, but every soldier I've talked to, from the highest to the lowest, state they believe in the mission and they are doing outstanding work in a very dangerous.
And I have nothing but respect for the healthcare providers at Fort Riley. It's the ability to access care that's the problem.
And that's healthcare as a budget item is eating our lunch in the whole government right now. I mean, I want to start from the big and then I'll go quickly to the small. Medicare, Medicaid, veterans, health benefits. If you just look at the numbers, 1980, healthcare is about 8% of the economy, 8.8%. 2004, it's 16% of the economy. So healthcare in 24 years has doubled as a percentage of the economy. And you look at it in our budget, which is primarily Medicare, Medicaid, veterans benefit, same features. Now, military has done a nice job in managing this, but what we've been trying to do is to keep up as much as we can, providing benefits. At the same time, we're running about a $400 billion deficit this year. So trying to fit those together. I think that the Congress has stepped in each of the past several years to change the president's budget on military retirees' health benefits, and I think we will again. It's just everybody's trying to find more health care dollars and trying to stretch them further within the system. And this, I think, is a policy issue. It's probably one of the most, if not the most difficult policy issue we're facing now, is to try to get those health benefits and pay for them within the budget. But you have my pledge, we're going to do everything we can to get that done. It's just this one's really, really tough to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Brownback, good afternoon. I'm Sean Jefferson, nutrition and exercise science kinesiology major. My question for you is, recently there's been quite a bit of controversy as to whether opening the ports to Miami to the United Arab Emirates will be more detrimental than beneficial to our country. Can you explain some of the debating that is taking place in Washington to resolve this issue?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's pretty simple factually as an issue. You've got a company based in UAE buying a company based out of the UK that's operating 6 major port facilities in the United States. And people saying, you know, whoa, we're fine if it's the British, but we really have questions if it's a country in the Middle East. And port security has been a problem zone for us. You all know this. This is a big, wide open country. We have a global reach and we have a global economy, and much of it flows through this nation. But in having done that, we also are in a war on terrorism. And so people are saying, oh, wait a minute, are they going to be more lax on looking for terrorists putting something in a container that slips through one of these ports? Are they going to know somebody in the company that they're going to somehow be able to slip this through? I think they're legitimate questions to ask. I'm a free trader. I believe in free and open trade. I think it's got to be fair. But our first objective of government is security. The first objective of the national government is security. And we've had a security breach, big one, in 9/11, unprecedented. So I think it's legitimate for us to really slow down. Let's take an in-depth look. The president says they've looked at this thoroughly and it should go forward. I have great respect for that. We're a separate branch of government. I think we need to take our time. It may be it goes through exactly as is, but I think we really need to look into that from a security standpoint.
Would that increase the Coast Guard on the Florida coast, or? I've noticed lately that there have been rumors or talks as to whether other countries will ship their supplies or weapons to the United Arab Emirates, and then from there they come to Miami, and that can potentially be a threat to us.
That's why we've got to examine it carefully.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I've dealt with the first fear. The second I'm still working with, so I'm going to read my question. In 2004 omnibus budget, Todd Tiehart and yourself obtained a $200,000 for an addition to Morning Star Ranch in Florence, Kansas. Morning Star Ranch is a 780-acre operating cattle ranch. It is also an evangelical training camp with focus on passages of the Christian Bible, and as it states in its website, it trains people based on solitary passages. Christians are allowed to use these facilities, not Jews, agnostics, Muslims, Buddhists, or others. Would you comment on your view of separation of church and state, and on your sense of value this addition has brought to the state of Kansas?
I'd be happy to. First, I think, and you'll have to let me do some more looking, and I'd be happy to, that they also help a handicapped population going to that ranch and assistance. But please, I need to check that further because you're catching me cold on that particular topic. My view of separation of church and state is that it should be. There should be a separation of church and state, but there shouldn't be a removal of church and state. It doesn't. It's and this is one of our big debate points. You can look at colleges. Manhattan Christian College, right across the street here, overtly Christian college, receives student loans sponsored by the federal government. People decide to go to Manhattan Christian College and use federally funded money in an overtly Christian setting. But the court has determined and said, look, that's that person's choice. There is a separation of church and state, but not a removal. If a person decides to do that, that's their choice. I spoke about prison mentoring programs here. We've got a faith-based prison in Kansas. I noted its recidivism rate's below 10%, where our basic system's at about 2/3. You can say, well, okay, that's a Christian message. I look at it and see a recidivism rate that's down below 10%, and the prisoner has to themselves say, okay, I'm willing to go into that. Nobody can force me into this. And if once I want to leave that because I don't think it suits me and go to another prison, they can go at any time, and they should be allowed to do that. I mean, I think that's where we get in difficulty is when we try to go from separation to removal. But I do not believe in a theocracy whatsoever, and have roundly engaged in opposition to theocracies, whether it's here or in Iran, other places around the world. Let me get back on the specifics too on that one, if you wouldn't mind coming up afterwards. Or is Chuck Alderson, are you here? My chief of staff in the state. Chuck, if you wouldn't mind catching him, and I want to get the specifics for you.
Senator, I think we have time for two more questions, one over here and one over here.
Yes, sir.
Okay, my name is Jeremy Williams. I'm a sophomore in speech communications, and I was listening to your speech, and I was kind of curious with your marriage incentives. Would you also be willing to give this to people who are gay and lesbian who have children?
Thanks for the question, and thanks for not talking about Brownback Mountain either, as I get quoted about. I've gotten that thrown at me several times lately, so I appreciate your willingness. And thank goodness for Dick Cheney and his hunting accident. It pulled me off of the Saturday Night Live routines. His was just too good. No, I would not, and I want to tell you why. And this is one of the core debates of our day right now. A number of countries have engaged this issue of redefining marriage as not being just between a man and a woman. And you know this, and the Scandinavian countries have done this, and Canada's done this in part, although it's looking another way on it. And some countries are a decade or so into this experiment. And frankly, this is a big experiment. This is a massive social experiment when you redefine a fundamental institution of society like marriage. This is a massive social experiment. And the early data on this is very, very troubling in a social data setting. I'll give you a quick stat from Norway. We've got counties in Norway redefine marriage as not just between a man and a woman, but it can be between two men, two women, redefined in another setting. What they found is not that many homosexual couples got married, but the number of heterosexuals who got married plummeted. As you redefined the institution and people said, well, you know, if marriage isn't this sort of really sacred thing, it's a man and woman, it says, well, why do we really do that? They've got counties in Norway where 80% of the children now are born to single parents. You can say, well, okay, that's their choice, but you can also see from the social data, if you have a series of children born in that situation, they can be raised well, but the numbers all move hard south against you. It's not the setting, so that's why I wouldn't incentivize that type of system.
But wouldn't you rather have a child that has a family structure? Like, even though it may not be that of a mother-father, but two loving adults who are there for their children, wouldn't you consider that to be something that children need, is more than just one parental structure?
I think the more caring adults you can have involved in a child's life, the better. I think the best setting for that is a man and a woman bonded together for life and grandparents surrounding them. I don't say that with malice towards anybody. I say that from the social data and from the basis of this. And I think these are important points to debate. The way we have to debate them is in a very careful way, that we don't make people feel like they're lesser, that we try to do it with a dignity and a care, but nonetheless looking at the truth of the matter.
All right,
Thanks for the question.
All right, thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Sir.
more over here.
Welcome home, Senator Brownback.
Thank you.
My name is George Hodges. I'm the oldest freshman at 50 years old here at K-State.
Hear, hear.
Number one, I'd like to compliment you on an exceptional speech on American exceptionalism. Number two, I have a question. It's concerning the Medicare Part D prescription drug bill that's currently being revamped, reorganized, reshuffled, for lack of a better word, just re-something. What are we doing in Washington to ensure that our senior citizens are being educated on what's the do's and the don'ts, the goes and the don't goes, the how to and how not to get educated on what their choices are for the rest of their lives in this enrollment deadline that may be May or it may be December. Are you familiar with this legislation?
I'm very familiar with this.
Do we have any answers yet, or are we still up in the air?
You know, this may seem a little flippant. We probably have too many answers. Is what we have taken. You've got the biggest rollout of a social program in the last 40 years that's just taken place. The biggest. This program, the Prescription Drug Program and Benefit, was initially scored at a $400 billion program over 10 years, and it's probably going to end up being more like $600 or $800 billion. Now, even in Washington, that's a big number. And you had the role, and we had glitches at the outset of it. And you now got a lot of people, older population, looking at, in some cases, I think probably too many choices in it, because but we wanted choices. We want people to have a choice in it. But it reminds me a little bit, or a lot, of your cell phone plan or your telephone plan, where Company A says, well, I'll give you 50 free minutes and weekends, this and that. And Company B says, well, I'll give you that, but also I'll give you a TV on your hard line. And Company C says, you know, how many of you are confused over your telephone, you know? Now, but you'd like the choice, don't you? I mean, but you're kind of going, well, it's too many choices. And we really may have ended up there with that. I would not doubt, but don't plan on it at this point in time, that the enrollment date gets extended we have in place a lot of different areas for people to access information. And they can start off with, they want to call my office. We'll get them into the right place. Pharmacists are working on this. Medical associations are working on this. The Health and Human Services Department. There are plenty of places to go, and there are computer programs, and the problem is that a lot of times you're dealing with a population that doesn't work on computers in some cases that can help you figure it out. But if not, you've got people that will. But call our office if nothing else, and we will get them to the right place to help them out. That date could well get extended from May, but I'd urge people, sign up now. Get signed up now. Don't count on that taking place.
Well, thank you for your answer, sir. There's a gentleman behind me that has a very important question. He needs to ask you, if you wouldn't mind extending it just one more question.
Now, usually this is where I really get in trouble, is taking one more question, is what my staff always tells me. Look, it was that last one, so I hope this is an easy...
I'll try not to disappoint you.
No.
My name is Robert Zoller, and I'm a businessman from Paola, Kansas, and I have 2 children here at K-State. And just thank you very much for your inspirational talk, especially about the family and keeping families intact and the importance of marriage. What I want to tell you about today is a family, my nephew, Brady Dick, and you talked to my wife a few days ago. Brady is married to a lovely Mexican woman, and they've been married for 3 years. They have a 15-month-old beautiful son named Zachary. Miriam and Zachary, could you just stand up, please, so the audience can see you?
Cutie.
They are about to be deported on March 3rd, in about a week. Not this Friday, but the Friday after that. She has to report to INS in Kansas City, near the Kansas City International Airport, at 10 o'clock in the morning. I have just one quick question. Can we meet with you for 10 minutes after your speech?
Sure.
Okay.
Happy to. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, before you depart, I want to remind you that on April 13th, the former president of Poland and the Solidarity Movement will be here at Kansas State to give a Landon lecture, Lex Walwensis, so we look forward to that. And meanwhile, Senator, we thank you for an excellent Landon lecture presentation. I wish all of you the best. Go K-State. God bless America. Thank you very much.
Let's go ahead backstage. Okay.